If you ask most people what they're being taught is the number one principle for getting leaner, they'll tell you it's to eat less and move more. That is, to consume less calories in the form of food and or increase one's caloric output with exercise. This principle seems simple and plausible, and it's often talked about with deep conviction like it's a universal truth. But the question is, does this approach actually work longer term? And the answer to that question is no. This is because being overweight is a function of fat accumulation, not overeating and sedentary behaviour. What does this mean? And if not for eating less and exercising more, then how do you actually get leaner longer term? Well, stick around because you're about to find out. To understand why consuming less energy from what we eat and expending more energy via exercise doesn't work for long-term leanness, we first have to understand where this advice comes from. The eat less and move more message gained prominence in America during the 1950s and has since been popularized and advocated as a simple and practical way to get leaner and healthier. Prominent nutritionists and public health figures like Ansel Keys fiercely promoted this idea. Keys' research and views on heart health were particularly influential in shaping public health policies and dietary guidelines around the world at this time. His work popularized the idea that a low-fat diet, combined with regular physical activity, was the key to great health. Many others soon followed suit and jumped on board Keys' promotion of the eat less and move more philosophy for not only heart health, but also for weight loss and the treatment of other lifestyle diseases that were growing in prominence at the time. Weight loss companies like Weight Watchers were soon founded and started to promote things like portion sizing, exercise, and calorie control for a leaner waistline. Government health agencies and organizations like the CDC, the NIH, and the World Health Organization also began creating large-scale campaigns in the 1970s to promote the eat less, move more philosophy as a way to improve public health and reduce obesity rates. The fitness boom of the 1980s further perpetuated this movement, with huge numbers of fitness gurus, trainers, and celebrities pushing Ansel Keys' original ideas and incorporating the eat less, move more philosophy into their advice and programs. And with the advancement of technology, by the time the new millennium came around, the development of calorie and fitness tracking apps began to gain traction for both measuring dietary caloric intake as well as caloric output via exercise. Yet despite the huge propagation of the eat less and move more theme over all these decades past, obesity rates have risen significantly. In the US alone, it's risen from 13% in 1960 to 42% in 2018. Obesity began to rise with the post-war baby boomers in the 1950s and at a time of increased food abundance and affordability. But this time period also coincided with innovations in food technology and a significant expansion of the food processing industry. During this time, many sugary drinks and processed convenience foods began to appear on the market. Fast food chains like McDonald's and Burger King also came to prominence with their highly processed meal options that were both very palatable and affordable. And with the advent of these kinds of foods on the market, you might think that the food industry had to fight hard against the ideas of Ansel Keys to gain the large foothold that they have today. However, the opposite is true. Food companies and manufacturers have actually embraced the eat less and move more philosophy and have profited from it. How? Firstly, by creating diet versions of their popular products, food companies have been able to give consumers a false sense of healthiness while still promoting the overconsumption of their processed foods. Secondly, by simplifying leanness and health to an energy in versus energy out equation, food manufacturers can justify their products in any diet as long as it's balanced with other foods and exercise. By shifting the public's focus from the qualitative aspects of food to the quantitative aspects, the food industry has successfully shifted the responsibility solely on the consumer for any weight gain or health issues that arise from consuming their products. And what's the main tool that the food industry uses for achieving this? The calorie. By reducing the fattening process to a simple equation that inadvertently places all foods and forms of exercise on the same level, the public has been easily lured into an eat less and an exercise more mindset. But before getting into the major flaw in this way of thinking and why it doesn't work, let's take a closer look at the topic of energy balance and what a calorie actually is. Calories are not a measure of energy, but rather a measure of a particular type of energy, heat energy. Calories were first used in physics and then appropriated for the field of human nutrition. To determine how much heat energy is in a food substance, a sample of it is placed inside a bomb calorimeter. The food is then ignited and the amount of calories it contains is derived from measuring the temperature of the water outside the bomb. A calorie is the amount of heat energy required to raise 1 kilogram or 1 litre of water by 1 degree Celsius. As you've likely seen on nutrition labels, foods are attributed caloric energy values based on their macronutrient composition. 1 gram of fat is equated to 9 calories, 1 gram of protein to 4 calories, 1 gram of carbs to 4 calories, etc. The sum of these calories consumed is then often used to determine daily intake targets to lose weight, gain weight, or maintain weight, depending on the person's goals. So what's the problem with measuring foods in caloric terms and manipulating one's energy intake to influence body composition? Well, there are quite a few. The first issue is that your body is not an enclosed bomb calorimeter. It's vastly different and more complex. A bomb calorimeter is what's called a closed thermodynamic system. This means that energy can flow in and out of the system during the combustion process, but there's no exchange of matter between the system and its surroundings. You, on the other hand, are an open thermodynamic system because you breathe, you eat, you sweat, you excrete, and you initiate a number of mass exchanges with your environment, not just energy exchange like a bomb calorimeter. Calories simply represent the heat released upon food oxidation and therefore have no direct impact on your body mass. When you stand on the bathroom scales, the reading doesn't measure your calories. The scales measure your body mass and of course the force exerted by gravity on it. Energy has no mass at all, so the only property of food that can alter your body mass is its nutrient mass, not its energy content. Whether it's the absorption of 1 gram of fat, protein or carbohydrate, your body mass increases by exactly 1 gram independent of the substrate's calories. An absorbed nutrient contributes to your total body mass as long as it remains within your body. How your body captures, utilizes, stores and discards various different nutrients is the overarching factor determining your mass and body composition, not an attributed caloric value. Food companies love to say that all calories are equal, and you know what? They're right. There are no different types of calories. A calorie is just a unit of heat energy, it's nothing more. Therefore, a calorie produced from a piece of chicken is exactly the same as a calorie produced from a piece of candy. But we know that the way the body metabolizes a piece of chicken is very different from how it metabolizes a piece of candy. And this is because we eat food mass that contains nutrients, not calories. Energy has no structure and therefore bears no relevance on how the body metabolizes a food. Different foods have differing amounts of chemical potential energy, which can be released as a food is metabolized. But how much energy your body captures, utilizes, stores and discards from any given portion of food is vastly different depending on the mass makeup of that food and the nutrients it contains. In other words, the same outcome does not ensue from ingesting equal caloric amounts of differing foods without consideration of their mass composition. On a basic level, protein, fats and carbs are not equally fattening even if their caloric values are the same. And I'll provide you with a specific case example with a client of mine a little bit later on to illustrate this point better. But for now, it needs to be made clear that your body does not combust foods in a rapid way like a bomb calorimeter. Instead, it metabolizes food and it metabolizes different foods differently. Not only does your body metabolize various foods differently, different people will also metabolize the same foods at varying metabolic rates. The caloric value of food also doesn't account for its impact on things like satiety, inflammation, the endocrine system, the digestive system, and more. It's the structure and mass makeup of the food that influences these effects. Calories can give us an idea of the energy content of a food, but they don't give us clarity on how much energy is actually derivable from it for the human body. Your body is much more complex than a bomb calorimeter, and there are many factors that can affect the way in which your body metabolizes and utilizes the food you eat. This is not only based on the type and quality of the food, but also other foods that may be consumed at the same time and how they're interacting with each other and your body. This also raises the question of what is actually food. By burning something in a closed bomb calorimeter, almost anything can have a caloric reading and theoretically be eaten and provide energy. Even burning a newspaper can produce calories. Most of us know though that we can't eat newspaper and our bodies cannot use this material for energy. Yet few of us question what kind of energy can or cannot be used between various different types of foods that we often eat, even though they might amount to the same amount of calories. Focusing more on food quantity versus composition is also how many food companies have been able to successfully shift the public's attention away from what they put into most of their foods. For instance, many food companies have been able to use pro-inflammatory industrialized seed oils in just about all of their products, along with all kinds of additives and flavor enhancers to make their products more palatable and addictive. Many companies have also readily jumped on Ansel Keys' low-fat bandwagon and focused on demonizing dietary fat in order to offer cheaper reduced-fat or low-fat product options. This also allows them to sell many of their processed products as lower calorie and place unsubstantiated health claims on their labels, such as being heart healthy. And if a company can't find anything healthy about their product to sell in its current form, they simply add ingredients to it to edify it. They like to bolster their processed products with things like added vitamins and minerals, or fortify them with fiber substitutes to create a high fiber food and mislead the public that the product is somehow good. But it's not just at the product level that many food companies look to skew perception. Large companies like Nestle, PepsiCo, Kellogg's, and Kraft Heinz have adopted the eat less and move more philosophy to project a healthy facade to the public that all their products are okay in moderation and can be burnt off with exercise. In fact, some have even teamed up with health organizations and provide them with funding in order to coerce public opinion. Some prominent examples of this include Kraft Heinz and the American Heart Association, Danone and the World Health Organization, and Coca-Cola and the American Diabetes Association. This is a clear conflict of interest, and these companies influence the research programs that they supply funding for in ways that benefit their own products and their own commercial interests. For instance, many food companies fund research that suggests there's specific benefits associated with their products, and downplay any associated risks. Some companies go even further and omit parts of their research entirely or adjust the data sets within a publication to suit their agenda. This is a major reason why not all nutrition research conducted by food companies is publicly available, not necessarily because they want to keep the information confidential for proprietary reasons, as many often claim. It gets worse though. Food companies often own or sponsor academic journals and the research that is published within these journals as well. This not only negates independent research, it also gives these companies substantial influence over the types of research that is included or omitted, as well as the conclusions that are drawn. And if that's not enough, many food companies can appoint their own reviewers for academic journals. These reviewers can influence whether a manuscript is accepted for publication, and if so, what revisions are required. And when all else fails to prove their products as being healthy and non-fattening, what do many of these companies resort to? Just exercise more to burn it off. In 2014, Coca-Cola came out with a Work It Out calculator campaign, which allowed users to input the type and duration of the exercise they do in order to see how many calories they can burn. This was a clear attempt to show the public that Coke can be consumed in a healthy way. However, Coke failed to provide any scientific evidence about the specific amount of exercise needed to offset the huge amount of sugar consumed from just one can of Coke. They also failed to mention that the amount of exercise required will vary greatly depending on individual factors such as age, weight, and fitness level. Which brings us to an often misunderstood scientific principle that the Eat Less and Move More supporters often reference with their philosophy, and that is the first law of thermodynamics. The first law states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. The calories in, calories out crowd reference this law to contend that the only way to lose fat is to consume less energy via your diet than you expend via exercise, or to expend more energy than you consume, or both. This will impose a so-called calorie deficit and guarantee that you will lose all the excess fat that you're carrying. Really, that's simple. You're overweight and carrying extra fat because you're in a calorie surplus, where you're eating more energy than you're expending with exercise. So the underlying presumption is that if you're over fat, it's simply because you're gluttonous and lazy. The only thing you now need to do is just eat less and exercise more and you'll be lean, right? Wrong. If you've actioned this advice before and failed, you're not alone. And if you've actioned this advice before and succeeded, this was not the underlying mechanism for your body composition change. Let's take a closer look at what the first law actually says and what the Eat Less and Move More and Calories In, Calories Out advocates fail to realize. The first law states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. Thus, the first law is not describing a direct cause, but rather an association. In other words, the first law explains that weight gain occurs when there's an energy surplus, but it doesn't specify the underlying biological mechanisms or factors that may have led to that surplus. In other words, saying that someone is overfat because they're consuming more than they're expending is like saying there's a traffic jam on the highway because there's more cars entering the road than leaving. Well, of course, but this doesn't tell you why there's a traffic jam in the first place. There could be many reasons for a traffic jam. Could be a big event nearby, could be roadworks, an accident, etc. So without knowing the specific cause of the traffic jam, it's very hard to fix it. Similarly, a person can be overfat for many reasons other than simply eating too much or not exercising enough. Some of these reasons can include the macronutrient composition of the diet, i.e. the ratio of protein, fat and carbohydrate in a person's diet, which can make a huge difference to their body composition. Different nutrients are metabolized differently, affecting how energy is stored, utilized and lost by the body. This can impact weight and body composition, even if the total calorie intake remains the same. The thermic effect of food is another factor to consider. Protein generates 20% more heat during metabolism compared to carbohydrates. It's also preferentially allocated towards the body's lean tissue rather than fat tissue. Thus, if a person is consuming more protein, they're likely to be leaner over time. Then there's the hormonal response to food. Carbohydrates can stimulate insulin release and promote fat storage. On the other hand, protein can stimulate the release of glucagon, which helps mobilize fat stores. Protein and fat also tend to be more filling than carbohydrates, which influences satiety and overall intake. The body's biological processes are also another factor to consider. Digestion, absorption, and metabolic rate play major roles in how a person converts food into energy and other forms of mass, e.g. muscle and fat mass. These processes involve complex biochemical pathways and can vary greatly from person to person and even situation to situation with the same person over time. Genetics shouldn't be taken for granted either. Some people may be naturally more proficient at metabolizing fats, while others may be better at handling carbohydrates. Some people might also naturally expend more energy than others when doing the same types of physical activities. The state of a person's gut microbiome is also another factor to consider. The composition of a person's gut bacteria can affect their nutrient digestion, absorption, and metabolism, and this will impact how many nutrients their body captures, utilizes, and excretes. The nature of physical activity also matters too. The type of exercise someone engages in can greatly influence how their body utilizes nutrients. For example, lower intensity exercise like jogging may expend more energy at the time of engagement, while higher intensity exercise like sprints may expend more energy in the hours after during recovery. See my other video for more on this, which I'll provide a link to in the description. A person's health status can't be overlooked either. Many medications can affect hormonal and metabolic status, as well as satiety, and it's not uncommon for people on various medications to start accumulating more fat on their frame, even while other things in their lives remain equal. As you can see, there are many other factors that can influence how much fat a person accumulates outside of their overall food intake and activity levels. To help demonstrate this point better, I'm going to show you a case example of a client who lost 10 kilograms of fat without reducing her energy intake via her diet or increasing her energy expenditure with exercise. But first up, I want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of this video, Fierbock. This Swiss menswear brand has just dropped their latest lines of fall and winter apparel, and the quality of these garments is awesome. I really love their Spacer hoodie, which is made of a cotton blend fabric that's super soft and comfortable, and it gives the hoodie an athletic and fit feel. This hoodie is perfect for any occasion, whether it's relaxing on the couch and rugging up indoors, or adding a warm stylish layer when heading outside. The colorways for these hoodies aren't plain or boring either, and I really like this mint green one in particular. The next garment in the Fierbock range that I really like is the modal blend long sleeve tee. Again, this garment is super comfortable, and the 4-way stretch fabric lets you move without any restrictions. The patchwork on the elbows adds a lot of style to the shirt, but also a lot of durability too, which is something I get frustrated with when it comes to most long sleeve tees. And last but not least is the smooth blend long sleeve tee. This athletic half zip design makes this shirt stylish, but also super easy to put on and take off. It's also a very lightweight shirt, has a lot of stretch, with very little restriction. The moisture wicking material makes it comfortable and breathable enough to be worn casually, but also when training outdoors. These Fierbock garments have become my go-to for both style and comfort during the cooler months of the year, and if you're interested in getting some for yourself or even someone else, Fierbock have given me a discount code which you can find in the comments and the description to this video. Now back to the main video. This client of mine is age 57 and gained fat during her menopause period. She was hiking 3 days per week and working out in the gym another 3. She couldn't fit in much more exercise as she was, and she tried the typical approach of lowering her calories to lose fat. Here's what the calorie and macronutrient breakdown of her diet looked like when she was stagnating at 78 kilograms and 33.5% body fat. Now here is the same client 5 months later after she dropped down to 68 kilograms and around 25% body fat. All we did was simply change the composition of her diet, nothing else. Her workout program didn't change and she couldn't fit any more exercise in anyway. Here's what the calorie and macronutrient breakdown of her diet looked like by the time she had lost the 10 kilograms of fat. Even though her calories were the same in both cases, she was clearly holding on to more body fat when there was more carbs in her diet and less dietary fat. She also felt far less hungry at her new weight and had much better energy levels. If we had tried the typical 500 calorie deficit approach instead, her protein and fat intake would be unsustainably low and she'd have very little energy. This client's problem was certainly not one of exercising too little or eating too much. Her problem was one of fat accumulation. By stimulating her insulin secretion with higher carbohydrate intake, it was driving her body to accumulate and hold on to fat. Only when her insulin levels fell could she release the fat from her fat tissue and use it for energy. And carbs not only affect insulin and the amount of fat that is stored by the body, carbs are also the macronutrient requiring the least amount of energy to be utilized for their metabolism. Not to mention, they're also the least satiating macronutrient and increase your hunger more than protein and fat. If you want to see another example of how manipulating the mass makeup of a person's diet affects their body composition, then check out my other video on this topic where I cover how I lost fat and even gained muscle while transitioning to a high calorie diet with all other things remaining equal. I'll put a link to this in the description to this video. Now, I'm not saying that you should adopt either of these approaches for your own body composition goals, and you also need to realize that a person can also become too lean as well. I'm simply giving you examples, and there are many others, of how people can hold on to fat and how they can lose it in ways that don't require them to eat less and exercise more. This is because fattening is caused by an imbalance in hormonal regulation and fat metabolism, not overeating or a lack of exercise. When the forces of fat deposition are greater than those of fat mobilization, your body will accumulate fat. In other words, your body's drive to store fat is greater than its drive to oxidate it. And we become leaner when the hormonal regulation of our fat tissue reverses this balance. And speaking of hormones, few people appreciate how powerful these are and how much they drive weight loss and weight gain. I mean, consider this scenario for a moment. Does a teenage boy go through puberty because he eats more, or does the teenage boy eat more because he's going through puberty? The obvious answer is the latter, of course. His growth is induced by hormones, and eating and retaining more of the nutrients he consumes is the end result and not the cause. Pregnant women are another example. Their hormonal status not only gives them the physiological drive to eat more, but also induces lethargy and a tendency to conserve more energy for the baby. Fattening is the cause, and more eating is the effect. And the same can also be said for those who have a metabolic or hormonal disorder. Hunger and sedentary behaviour are not just born out of gluttony and laziness, instead they can be driven by a metabolic and hormonal disposition to grow larger. Someone's life stage, their genetics, their health status, and the types of foods that they regularly consume can all influence these proclivities. This means that you can have two different individuals who consume the same amount of food and do the same amount of activity, yet one grows fatter while the other one becomes leaner. Nutrient intake, utilization, and storage are heavily connected to each other, and they're not independent variables like the calories in, calories out crowd often tells you they are. And it's not just hormonal status that can drive a person to eat more or less and expend their energy differently. The food itself can impact behavior and energy expenditure by affecting the body's hormonal status. For instance, decreased nutrient intake can prompt things like decreased thyroid activity, a drop in metabolic rate, less nutrient utilization, and increased energy conservation by the body. This means that someone can decrease the amount of nutrients they consume to lose fat, but their body reacts by down-regulating and keeping their weight and fat mass the same. And more exercise can also become detrimental to some people who are trying to lose fat because it can increase the stimulation of hormones like ghrelin, which drive a person to eat more food to compensate and maintain their homeostasis. Of course, there are numerous other reasons why we accumulate fat, but those are just some of the main ones. The crucial thing to realize is that it's not how many calories are consumed in the diet or expended with exercise, but rather it's how the nutrients you consume are captured, utilized, and discarded by your body based on the environment that you place it in. We don't consume calories anyway, we consume food and nutrients. Some of these nutrients have more easily derivable energy for the human body, and some do not. Some are easily stored by the body, and some are not. Thus, energy is not the only thing a person can derive from food, nor is all food derivable energy. There is also no calorie transport chain to your cell's mitochondria, and how you utilize different nutrient substrates for energy has a big impact on how much fat you'll accumulate. Calories in, calories out is appealing because it's a simple measure, but it's also extremely reductionist and misses the whole picture. It also makes it easier for food manufacturers to tell you that their rubbish has a place in your diet. And if you get fatter and unhealthier as a result of eating their food, then it's simply your fault and you're just not active enough. But by now you should be able to see why this advice to eat less and exercise more is asinine. It's like telling a drunk you're a drunk because you drink too much and you just need to drink less to get sober. It pains me to see how many people struggle to be lean and healthy because they're misled to believe that there's a simple one-size-fits-all solution to all their body composition problems. If you've been struggling to get in shape and stay in shape, you should now have a much better understanding as to the possible reasons why. If the cure for corpulence was so simple, almost everyone would be leaner and healthier for it. As you know though, as a society, we're not better for this approach of eat less and exercise more. In fact, you could argue that we're actually getting worse. So don't get caught up with the crowd. To be leaner and healthier, put more emphasis on what you're being fed, and I mean that in more ways than one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.